program might contain strong language. If you think you may be offended, switch off now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Watch Mojo and the Inside Mojo podcast. I'm your host, Rob, and with me, as always, is Watch Mojo's co-founder and CEO, Ashkan Karbasfrooshan, who's back once more from the great city of New York to join us here from home in Montreal. How's it going, Ash? This is episode 19. We're getting close to the end of this.
We're getting close to the end. It's going really, really well, but I won't lie. Last night I was waking up, I was so disoriented. I was like, where am I? Am I in a hotel room? Am I at home? And it was just, it's good to be back home, but very big. I mean, 3 weeks, I'd never been back to New York 3 weeks. So it's a great city, but when you travel that much, you just, it's hard to stay sane, basically,
Travel is exhausting. I don't know how people who fly, regularly week to week do it, because it's just, you probably get used to it.
And you have to be disciplined to like drink and be hydrated. I mean, one time I ended up in the hospital. I mentioned this because I did 2 Montreal, LA trip. Well, LA, and then the next week San Diego for Comic-Con. And when I came back, it was like a Saturday. It was sunny. It was warm, and I was just driving around. I was getting more and more dehydrated. And that night, I started to have like palpitations, and then I ended up in the hospital. I was fine, but so yeah, no, you have to be careful.
Cool. Well, the theme of this week's episode is kind of baseball related. We're playing the long game. What inning is it? And or if we're talking about a best of 7 series, what game is it? In the context of YouTube specifically. But before we get into that, you're working on a kind of different project right now. Can you tell us about this project for Sound Mojo?
Sure. I thought you meant the special strategic operation that lured me to New York. But no, while I was in New York, again, I was very lonely and bored most of the time. And I was just after we did the top 10 Persian songs and the community reacted well, they were like suggesting other songs, and it dawned on me, I'm like, the Farsi language is so lush and rich that you could take basic words, and when you write like lyrics, when you hear it, it just sounds like very complex words. So I remember like one song, I was like, if you translate this into English, it's so pedestrian. And then, being a wordsmith, I'm not a lyricist, or I wasn't, I was like, I just started to play with it, and I would just kind of try to make it nicer, add metaphors and symbolism and alliteration. And then I was like trying to match, like translating, adapting, and matching words with the rhythm is like something that drew me. So I started when I was actually in Buenos Aires. I adapted one song, and that was it. I thought I'd leave it at that, but then I was kind of like addicted. So in the last week, I translated 6 more songs. So basically, we have 7 songs that I've taken from, Iranian music. And I kind of like am rearranging them. Like if one might be more poppy, I might make it more hard rock. It's like speaks to my influences in hard rock and rap and electronica music. Yeah. And I mean, 6 years ago, Joe, who's one of the gentlemen who helps us produce this podcast, I recruited him for Sound Mojo, which was to be like a label. And again, I did what I usually do, which is, pass the puck first instead of taking a shot. And we were kind of like recruiting artists and featuring them, but there was no real through line. It was just people that were interested to be showcased on our network.
Yeah. My band was one of those bands.
Was it? Okay, I didn't want to be I did think so. So yeah, so it was like, but it was like, what was the affinity and whatever. Anyways, but so after 6-7 songs, I was like, we could just probably do an album and partner with artists. And I have like a ton of ideas of like how to package it and distribute it and market it and commercialize it. And then because you guys recommended I buy a like professional mic for the podcast, I was like, you know what? When I'm trying to explain to people that I'm translating, they don't really get it because they think I'm doing a direct translation. So at first, a lot of like Iranians who are into the music and who know me were like, well, this isn't a direct translation. I'm like, I know. I don't want to directly translate it. I want to adapt it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, who cares? Like, you're an entrepreneur. You put yourself out there. So it's not that I'm planning on singing, but I was like, I'll just record a demo to illustrate, like show instead of tell. And then people were like, oh, I get what you're doing. That's actually pretty neat. So now I actually have a few musicians who are like leaning in and interested. And I'm just trying to think of the logistics of like, okay, how do we do this? It could be all virtual. Like they have the lyrics. We would get the mechanical license. because we're not just doing straight up covers, I think the best practice, and I would never do this without people's blessing, is to reach out to the artists. But some of these artists have passed away. Like, like there's some, stars of the 80s and stuff that I would have to reach out to their estate. And like, sometimes I'll email one of the labels like Tarane Records, and the email's dead. And I go to the website, there's no website. So even that's but yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I like variety. I like challenges. And so, I can now add lyricists to my multi-hyphenate.
Well, that's great, and it
no, it's cool.
ties in with the revival of the Iranian channel that you're
The
bringing
Persian,
back.
yeah, the Iranian channel is going to come back. It's part of. It was one of the 30 channels we launched like a decade ago, and it was one of like the 15 that we sunset or paused. And I've always said, like, if we have like a person who could be a strong editorial, or if like this, that could be a conduit, not just to do content. When we bring it back, it will be in English. I realized like the first one was in Farsi, which at that time made sense. We're just localizing the content. But I think here the idea is it's more to represent true Iranian culture and history and all that to the global audiences. But it's also, it wouldn't make sense. Like, I don't even read or write Farsi, so it wouldn't play to our strengths, So found also somebody who's going to come and be like the channel manager, content lead. And then it ties into this. And then the idea is I would replicate this formula. I don't know if you ever listened to techno music, but there was a series called Global Underground where like a DJ would record a set in a studio. The first one I think was Tony the Vit in Tel Aviv, but it was popularized by like Paul Oakenfold and Max Graham and Deep Dish and Nick Warren and all these like great DJs I used to listen to. And it was cool. Like it would be like Paul Oakenfold in New York, or like Nick Warren in Prague. And like you kind of felt like, and because I love travel, so what I'm pretty much going to do is that formula, like take music from other languages and then have like hybrid versions to popularize it. Like in Farsi, most of them are going to be translated to English, and there's a method to the madness. But yeah, like if we did a Spanish thing where we take like Spanish songs, I'm not sure if they would all be only in English, but I think that's what I want to do. I want to kind of like cross-pollinate. It makes sense in my head, but I agree. Yeah. Like we'll see, album by album. But anyway, so
for sure. Well, remixes.
I was trying to do the Sound Mojo thing, and it's very weird how it just came to be. So life's funny that way.
Yeah, we already have those pieces in place, so might as well use them. So last week you teased us that you were going to be meeting with quite a high-profile business person during your recent trip to New York. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, I'm very transparent. I mean, it's no big deal. So basically, as I said, like last December, we started getting a lot of media companies that were like, hey, another year goes by. We're not big on YouTube. Would WatchMojo be interested in joining our larger organization or similar size organization in some kind of merger? And even though like the world was very uncertain, I could sense that like, yeah, there's this growing interest in YouTube and AVOD, hence the what inning are we? We'll get to that in a few minutes. And so hired an investment bank. I could do it myself, but clearly, there's a lot I don't know. So working with the investment bank, I kind of gave them, the 5 or 6 companies that we were talking to, and then they obviously do their job, and then they go reach out to a bunch of people. So I was surprised. One day they're like, well, how do you feel about talking to Vince McMahon of WWE fame?
There he is.
There he is. There's Vince. And I was like, well, tell me more. I go, I know he sold WWE. He exited that. And now it's like TKO is UFC and WWE. It's partly owned by William Morris Endeavor. And I was like, well, what's Mr. McMahon doing? And they were like, well, he set up a fund to look for sports, media, and entertainment. And he was like going to be one of like the 15 companies we spoke to. But it was last second. So unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to meet him, which is fine. But I was thinking that like, yeah, Vince McMahon, I mean, I never watched wrestling like in the last 10, 15, 20 years, but like growing up, like in the late 80s and 90s, I mean, I would watch WWE and like Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan. I know Sting wasn't in WWE, but like I loved Sting, and he was in the.
Well, he came to WWE.
Yeah, but by then I wasn't really watching that much. And anyway, but the thing is, when I was talking to the bank, and I was like, what's funny about Vince McMahon is today you hear like creator economy, influencers, vloggers, but I'm like, it's just storyteller, and like Vince McMahon was the quintessential storyteller entrepreneur, it's also, he built that company with his wife and his daughter, was involved. So kind of a fan. So I was looking forward to meeting him, but I mean, I met so many people that just we couldn't coordinate it. And so, yeah, no, it's just funny because also life is very, misconnections, like serendipity. You could meet somebody, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, Bell Media, when Randy Lennox, who, speaking of music, he was head of Universal Music Canada. He and his team discovered Shania Twain, Justin Bieber, The Weeknd. So he was brought on Bell Media to kind of like push them more global and push them more to own content, not just be a licensor of content. And Randy, who I really liked and respected as well, because he was a character and he was like a media guy and storyteller. He took a particular fancy to myself and the company, and he really was aggressive. And in 2017, we were really, really close. And like we had 5 conversations with 5 different companies. But why I hired a bank is because I realized what I did wrong. I would do it sequentially. I felt like I would be very cheating if I was like talking to 5 parties at once. That's why you have a bank. The bank could do that. You kind of stay pure. And so we were very close to doing a deal with Bell, but because Bell is owned by BCE, which is like a telco, they have certain parameters of what the CEO of Bell Media can and cannot do. So in the end, we kind of like diverged on the terms. Then I went to Greece, and then I came back to London for WatchMojo Live in London. And then we kind of just moved on, and they moved on. So it's just very funny how, if like 7 years ago, Randy and I would have like said, okay, let's converge on the terms instead of like, given his restrictions, we diverge, I would be probably part of Bell Media. WatchMojo would be part of Bell Media, and I would be, very different reality. And it's kind of funny because in my 20 years, I've been so lucky to meet so many incredible people, business people. I joke that like, yes, when I was at the Laureus Awards, I saw Andrei Shevchenko, who was a striker that I really liked when I was younger, playing and watching soccer. And I just saw him and I was like starstruck. Now he's a soccer player and I love soccer, but I get very starstruck when I meet business people and entrepreneurs. There was another gentleman I met. I won't name him just because that's a group that is looking at submitting an offer. So I've learned, I'm not saying it to show off, but like I saw this person who's very successful, very well regarded. And then a few weeks later, I don't mind this. And I saw him in the lobby and I was just meeting his lieutenants for that first meeting. In the second week or first week, I was in New York. And I was like, I had goosebumps and I was like, wake up. You're like a 47-year-old man, like, why are you getting excited seeing this? I guess he's probably in his 50s. Anyway, so.
Well, it's normal. It's
yeah,
people that you know of. Yeah.
It's my craft. This is what I do. It's my racket. I like entrepreneurship.
Cool. So where does Vince rank amongst the other cool people that you've met in your business?
Well, I didn't meet Vince, to be fair. I mean, Vince, look, I don't doubt that there are things that I'm sure even if he's now like, let's have a follow-up with Ash, he may not. But look, I know that Vince was accused of certain things that on my personally, I'm not saying I condone, but I also like with WatchMojo, when I was like, okay, if we're going to do, let's say like funniest sitcoms of the 80s, I understand why during the Me Too, it was insensitive to put like Bill Cosby on the Cosby Show. But at the same time, if you do like funniest comedians of the 21st century, I don't see how Louis C.K. wouldn't be on that list, for example. Like you have to separate the craft from the person because, like I'm sure Steven Tyler was dating a 14-year-old. There's a lot of people that did very bad things. So I'm like, if you're going to, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you're going to start to be very selective. So I'm really just commenting on that storyteller entrepreneur, that the guy that kind of like built WWE into this like icon. So I mean, as a guy who's a builder of a media brand, he would have been up there. But I mean, I think there's like a few interesting people. Like I met Jeffrey Katzenberg. So Jeffrey Katzenberg is the K in DreamWorks Spielberg, Katzenberg, and Geffen. And I didn't know this, but Spielberg was like super successful and wealthy. David Geffen, who had Geffen Records, was super successful and wealthy. But to partner with those two gentlemen, the legend is like he had to go and find like loose change in his couch and, to kind of like be able to partner with them. And then he built that. Well, the three built that into a huge exit to Universal. So when he launched, I think before he launched Quibi, which admittedly wasn't the success he envisioned, but he was already like an icon. So I met him for breakfast And whenever I meet people, I always pick up the tab, even though I could imagine he would not. But I just, at the end, like, we talked, it was great. He was really impressed with like what we had built, and he was like, it was very flattering, very humbling, frankly. But it was like, when I left, I'm like, okay, well, thank you for. I could tell like he had set up shop at the deli, would meet me for breakfast, and then he would have another meeting, like the way I do it sometimes when I'm traveling. I just set up back to back. So I'm like, all right, sir. I'm like, it's been such a pleasure to meet you. And I'm like, okay, I'll just get the bill and I'll be on my way. He's like, if you do that, you will leave here in a body bag. I was like, okay, you could pick up the tab for my like $8, egg and bagel there anyway. So he was cool. I know we talked about Jeff Molson.
Yeah.
Another one is Ted Leonsis. So Ted Leonsis is the owner of the Washington Capitals. I met him, like there was a period where one of our advisors was Ted Prince, former president of National Geographic. So he was in the DC area. He was very well connected. But actually, no, Ted, I used to email myself like a crazy person when he was still at AOL when I started my career. So he was like kind of an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur. He was part of AOL. They had their IPO. He made a fortune. And then he basically exited like the media business. Like many people, they're like, enough of this racket. And then he bought the Washington Capitals, and I think he owns the Mystics and a bunch of other stuff. So once when I was in DC, I just emailed him. I said, look, I'm a huge fan. He's Greek immigrant, Iranian immigrant, Canadian, whatever. And again, I just liked, these are people I study and all. So we chatted, it wasn't for any business, but it was just, I think we had just beaten them, actually. We had the Canadian, the Montreal Canadiens.
We had a big hand in that victory, didn't we, Ash?
Huge hand, yeah. So no, like Montreal Canadiens had defeated, I think, like the season before, the Washington Capitals were the top seed in 7. So I tried to be very diplomatic about that, but I'm sure I alluded to it. No, I met a lot of great people. I mean, I really, really, very humbling. And it's like, well, honestly, like I go, like the best thing I have are the people that I've met and recruited and met and learned from. But it is very strange because like this week, if I really like, it was a bit, my daughter turned 17. So that's already shocking. My daughter took her first steps when she turned 1 in New York, when we went there in like 2008 to kind of generate business and raise financing. And it was very different because I used to go to New York all the time. And I wrote in my 3rd book, I used to basically get on a plane to go around to get rejected. Like that was the thing. I would basically just buy an airline ticket to go pitch to somebody. And they were like, you seem like a pretty, competent individual, but we don't invest in content, or you're in Montreal, or we don't like your face, whatever. Usually all of the above. But this week, the last 3 weeks, we let's say we met with 12 or 13 or like that range, 10 to 15 companies that were all super impressed. They're all super eager. I have no idea where this is going to go. We may not even do anything because we don't really have to. But I mean, this process was exhausting. Like it was also condensed. So I'm glad we did it once, but I probably don't want to ever do it again. So I'm like, I may just do something just to start a new chapter. And I mean, if you look by the fact that I'm producing a record, it's like, I do want new challenges. I do want a bigger, like talking of sports. New York is the capital of the world. It's the media capital. It's the mecca of media. So I kind of now I'm like, we all collectively have built, and Kevin and Derek came with me and they've been with us forever and since day one. So I am a bit like, we've built a tremendous business that is really now respected by so many people. And it's one of the best, I mean, these are what they said. I didn't say, they're like, this is one of the best run companies we've seen in the space, right? So I was like, okay, we could keep doing what we do for another few years, or we could really, really like, get in the major leagues, so to speak. I mean, we are in the major leagues, but you know what I mean? Like just take it to the next level.
Yeah.
Go ballistic. And I am going ballistic now. There's all these projects like this album that I'm like, I'm Machiavellian. It's just common sense. I'm like, I should do a lot of these now and start it. Because if a company buys us, some are going to be like, Ash, we want you to do all these crazy ideas. Like that's one school of thought. The other school of thought is you guys do certain things really, really well. And then because you're independent, you're being forced, or you're pushing to do other things to diversify. There's another school of thought, comparative advantage, principle of specialization, that's going to say, yeah, but why don't you not do those things? Or those things are just your hobbies. But like, we want you to. So I'm kind of saying, F it. Let's just go crazy. It's like Tom Brady, just release the hounds. Let's go do everything.
Well, we have a pretty cool meeting coming up, I think, tomorrow, where we're going to be talking about podcasts. So that is something that I wanted to actually ask the audience. If you have any suggestions or questions about the series that we're wrapping up next week with episode 20, or any suggestions for future shows that you'd like us to do, please let us know. Leave comments. We'll talk about those next week when we get into what's to come.
Yeah, and I mean, this was Yvonne's idea. Yvonne will be leading that meeting tomorrow. But I think it was also just any questions regarding the company, the industry, whatever. Like, even if you are like, I want to be a creator, I want to start a media company, just any question, ask away, and then we'll probably create like themes, some around. And yeah, my idea is tomorrow when we have that meeting, let's come up with a couple of show ideas. I mean, again, knowing me, it's like 15 ideas, but let's come up with 2. Let's come up with 1. Let's come up with 3. And then it's like it could draft off the inside something, whether it's inside some sport or inside some theme or inside blockchain, crypto, inside Iran, inside America, inside Trump, whatever. It's like the sky's inside MCU. I mean, it could be anything. So I'm like, let's then next week summarize it. I'm so transparent, but I think this is the best way to run a company. Then let's just summarize it and say, these were the ideas we had. We feel, and again, it's like that checklist. What is authentic? What do we really have like expertise in? What would make good, compelling content? What can you do? And I use that number 20. It could be 10, but I don't like the idea of doing a podcast forever because I feel that then, like Rogan is just a Q&A. So that's just, you can have anybody. But I feel like if it's on a given theme, I rather if it's like a collection of books. It's like there's 7 episodes or 20 episodes. We used to say when we did WatchMojo videos, people would be like, how long should the video be? I'm like, as long as it naturally should be. Like, don't stuff 7 pounds of beef in a 2-pound bag, and don't try to like fill 2 pounds of meat in a 10-pound bag. So then, the next week we'll wrap this up. And then, just because some people may have a good memory. And so, my idea was, it's funny, I decided to produce an album first instead of the documentary. But the documentary I realized would be an excellent bookend to this chapter of WatchMojo, where then at some point I explain the rationale, like respecting confidentiality of the other parties. I don't want people to freak out. But then where I would actually explain a little bit like when Michael Arrington sold TechCrunch, he signed the deal with Tim Armstrong of AOL at TechCrunch's Disrupt. Like they were on stage and it was so funny. And then we could get into the meat of the show. Tim Armstrong was like, you could see it. Tim Armstrong was an executive at Google. He was then CEO of AOL. He wanted to buy TechCrunch, which was at the time a very influential blog. And Michael Arrington, like if you think I'm crazy, like Michael Arrington was seen as like a loose cannon. Tim Armstrong was like, you're not going to make me sign this. And then you're going to like tear it off and be like, AOL's a dinosaur, screw this. And he said on stage. And I was like, oh my God, if Arrington does that, he's crazy. But he didn't. Tim Armstrong signed it. Then Michael Arrington signed it. And it was a bit anticlimactic because you were expecting like theatrics. And so that was like 2007 or 2008, and like at that time, when I told people like at those tech events that I was like producing content for YouTube, like they were really like, why? Like, why don't you build an app that's like a, toilet locator, Crapster or something? I was like, why would I do that? Anyway, so it's just crazy how the world has changed, and like we were there and people were, yes, we were presenting, but they were ultimately trying to make the case as to why they're the best home for us. And it's just a weird dynamic when for the first few years of my life, I was desperately trying to find a home for WatchMojo. So,
Well, that's a good segue into the body of the episode, because if we're using baseball analogies, like we said, what inning is it now? And can you take us through the different innings when regarding the lifespan of WatchMojo?
Sure. So let me just go. I always like to start macro. Sure. So people always ask me like, what inning is it? Like whether it's with YouTube or with like fast, free ad serving TV, like the Plutos and those companies, the Tubi, and all that. And now YouTube is going to dominate fast. People are not even aware of how YouTube is going to swallow the world. We'll talk about that. And I would be like, look, it's not a good analogy of what inning is it, which is the analogy everybody likes. I go, the real analogy is it's a best of 7 series. And undoubtedly, like if you look at the world of fast, you could argue that the first winners might have been like, frankly, Samsung and Roku.
Yeah, and for those who don't know the acronym FAST,
it's free advertising. It's free ad-supported television.
Right.
The idea is AVOD is on demand. It's advertising video on demand or subscription video on demand. You choose what you want to watch. Yeah, so we could keep this up for a bit. Whereas free ad supported television is more like linear TV, but you don't get the content through cable or satellite the way we used to. It's through IPTV. It's through over-the-top connected devices on your CTV, your smart, your connected TV, your smart TV. And like WatchMojo's content, 45% of our watch time is already on connected TVs, which is insane. That's because we're at long-form programming. So the analogy that I used was, even let's go further. When it comes to like fast, it's not the innings really. It's more that some games have been played. There have been winners. So the first one was Zumo, whatever, that like I think Comcast bought. The second game was like Samsung and Roku. They kind of bought it. Like Roku was, I guess, like these are more hardware manufacturers. The third one was really the Pluto TV and Tubies, which took a different approach, but they kind of like one got acquired by Fox for 600 or 300, whatever, some obscene amount. Pluto TV got acquired for another obscene amount by Paramount Viacom. And I would say right now, when it comes to fast, we're like almost in the fourth game. You know, like there's a lot of game has been played, and there's a lot more. And I do think that here on out, YouTube is going to dominate. And what was really impressive in all my meetings is I did not have to tell people this. People were like, YouTube is going to swallow the whole world. YouTube is going to just crush the competition. And so let's go back now. How do we end up here? So I think if you look at it from 2006 to 2012, that was really like the wild, wild west. Like there was no business. It was like preseason. You know, you're playing like Grapefruit League. There was no business model. There was really, there you go. At that point, nobody wanted to be online. The rights holders were like, we're good. We're going to hold out. Let's figure out the business model. And they shot themselves in the foot. We talked about this last week.
Yeah.
Like, the media companies come back, and we discussed why is text media different than video media, like technically and programming wise, they had very different challenges. But that was the wild, wild west era. I think we really were fortunate to have started then. And we could just take our time to figure out product market fit. Yes, there was a lot of noise and competition, but you could also, being based in Montreal, avoid that noise and competition. And I'd never, ever talk about the company or the industry without saying that, like, well, yeah, if we didn't have that kind of head start or just lucky to start when YouTube started, we would have probably had success, but not the same degree of success. So that was like until 2012. 2013 to 2017 does coincide with both WatchMojo's preteen years and the industry's preteen years. Like if you think about it, that's around the time when like YouTube launched Google Preferred, currently called YouTube Select, with better ads. They launched Brandcast. That's the time when they really grew into like management. Like they had a lot of people from traditional come. They had a lot of like more buttoned up executives. And in this case, as you could tell, like we were really just tinkering and figuring it out. But like for us, I'd say 2012 to 16, whether it's 12 to 16, 13, 17, that era, that was like our lightning in a bottle. Like hyper growth, we went from 10,000 subscribers in 11 to 100,000 in 12 to 1 million in 13. And we finished that period with 15 million subs. And not that it matters to anybody else. Like when I look back, it was a great period, like as an abstract, like as a continuum. And obviously, I'm a bon vivant, Renaissance man. I love life. But there was not a moment that I was actually happy.
Really?
Because I was managing so many growth. I was managing. Look, I love everybody. I had hired all these kids out of school and given the keys to the asylum to these inmates who were, some of them never really wanted to work in a 9-to-5. Now they left. We let some go. Like it was like, it's fine now. But at that moment, I was like dealing with toddlers. And I love that. I love toddlers. But it was just like that was, and then I brought on all these senior execs whom I liked, not quite the Jeffrey Katzenbergs, but like senior execs that were pretty good and that I respected, but just there was no fit. Like it's hard for executives who worked at big media companies to come in the YouTube, Instagram universe. Like it's a different universe, right? It's like when Michael Jordan, who was great at basketball, tried to play baseball. Okay, he had some good swings and a good game here too, but it's not the same thing. I mean, that's good. We're keeping with the analogy. So I was really go. I mean, it's fine. I wish I would. I mean, I was a great dad. I was always around. I traveled a lot, but like I didn't really enjoy myself. Now I find I'm more in the moment. Like I'm here, I'm just talking to you. we're talking. I don't really even think of anything else. At that period, it was not the case. I was thinking of a lot, but it was like the preteen, right? It was kind of like figuring ourselves out and whatnot. And then 2018 to 2020 was just like frustration and self-doubt because we had walked away. Well, we walked away from the Bell talks. Really, they changed the terms of the deal, and it was their right. We had not really finalized, but they made a material change in the terms when the deal went from being like really a bit of a no-brainer to, well, this doesn't really make sense anymore. And because at that point I didn't really have a bank, I had to communicate that. So it created some frustration, I think, on their end when it was well within my right also to say this isn't the same deal. And I'm human. There were a lot of times when we reinvested a lot and our revenues were flat and our profits went, not that I care about the profits, but that's how you're measured in business, which I hate. Yeah. It's true. You're valued. There was a lot of moments of doubt where I was like, did I do the right thing? Should I have just done the deal? It wasn't a perfect deal, but there's no perfect deal. In my heart, I knew I'd done the right thing, but there was a lot of people also questioning me and all good. And then, the thing that is hard for an entrepreneur is in 2019, we actually hired CIBC, an investment bank in Canada, because then Bell again was like, well, maybe we could revisit the convo. And Bell had twice bought companies where CIBC was the advisor representing the seller. So I was like, okay, to give them peace of mind that if they're interested and we're both on the same page, they're not wasting their time. Hired CIBC, learned a lot. They did a very good job. And in that process, initially in 2019, I've never actually gotten into the details, but why not? We actually only had, despite talking to so many companies, Hearst, so many companies, we only actually had one company in the end that did management presentation. And we almost had to like fake it. We almost had to set up the scheduling in a way to give the indication that there were more parties. And that party was Ziff Davis, IGN, who ironically had bought AskMen, but this was a different regime. But their offer was like half of what Bell had valued us. And understandably, as a finance guy, I understood it. Our profits had gone down. Mm-hmm. We didn't have the same growth rate. And whereas Bell was competing with 4 other parties, thereby pushing up the value, even though Ziff Davis didn't know, well, we didn't have that much leverage. So when they were like, this is the offer, I was like, okay. And then I brought it to my executive team partners. And I was like, I'll do whatever you guys want. I'm like, if you guys want to join a bigger company, and there's pros and cons, more resources, more focus, but more discipline, because I'm disciplined and conservative, but I'm pretty laissez-faire. I mean, some people may not have experience working with others, but I assure you, like, there's a lot of things that I'm pretty chill, despite not being a very chill person. And it was interesting because WatchMojo 2020, which we discussed in a previous episode, we had invested in so many things, Miss Mojo, Snap, a lot of other stuff like the lineup and shows. But Snap and Miss Mojo were 2 of the shining stars where we as a team looked at the numbers and were like, we could do this deal, but it does feel like we're about to go into like our second phase of growth. And now we're entering our third. Well, we've already entered the third phase of growth, which is hard. It's hard for companies to avoid decline. When they have infancy, growth, maturity, usually they go to decline. We've twice avoided that and found new growth, which is like incredible. I remember vividly one of my colleagues just turning to me and saying, I don't think we should do this deal. And then I let the conversation go because I was like, okay, who else feels this way? And one by one, everybody was like, we should. And even though it was my decision in theory, I don't run the company like that. So I was like, if we have alignment and if we have consensus that we prefer to stay alone, let's stay alone. Now, another self-doubt, what happens a month later? COVID. Oof. So now again, I go through one period of self-doubt after the Bell Media. Now COVID hits. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Like we thought we could die. And yes, we benefited because of more people watching home entertainment. And, I was explaining to one of the parties what happened because they're like, how come your revenues just shot up? And I'm like, imagine you're Samsung as an advertiser and you sign a deal with Google, or even better, you're WPP, a large ad agency holding company. You sign $1 billion deal to spend advertising on Google platforms, but by committing to $1 billion, you get a 10% discount, which you could pocket, let's say, as an agency. you get season tickets to any sports, you get hookers and cocaine and, you know, the stuff that greases the wheel. And people are like shocked when I say this. Well, how do you think this industry works, buddy? So you commit to them. Now, there is such a thing as force majeure, where WPP could tell Google, well, because of this pandemic, we're allowed to not spend this money. But WPP wants to spend that money because they charge, let's say, 15% to the advertiser. So what ended up happening is, instead of, let's say, running ads on Photos.com, as an example, a travel site, nobody's going on a travel site during COVID. WPP was like, where could we spend our money? YouTube. What are some brand safe channels? WatchMojo. And it's funny, to me, this is like normal, obvious. So explaining it, I was like, yeah, there's a lot of details in the anyway. So that's what happened. But at first, I remember waking up going, oh, you're a moron. I'm like, you regret it for, I mean, not continuously, but at various moments, I'm like, you had all this doubt. You question yourself. People ridiculed you. Why didn't you do the Bell deal without naming that it was Bell? And I'm like, you had another offer. Okay, it wasn't as great as that one, but it was a great deal. But I was like, you turned it down because you listened to your partners? I was like, what kind of moron are you? I was also very confident that it was the right decision, but it's never black and white. And then slowly but surely, we had a rocket ship period where 2-3 years of future growth came up faster, the way Shopify and Amazon grew. And so I view that as like the rebellious teenage years. Like 2020, 21, 22 was like, you know, just you're a teenager, you get in trouble, you do crazy shit, you just start figuring out life. You stay out of trouble, but like you're always on the verge of like, Dad, you need to come get me. I messed up, you know.
Before we move on to the next era, I was just curious to know if you think that the company's trajectory would have been any different had you made the deal with Bell or IGN.
So it's always the person. I think Randy and I could have made a great team. I would have learned a lot from him, and I think he would have been able to like leverage my skills, you know, and really like build Bell into something really, really bigger and better than what it is. Not that we're special, but because like WatchMojo is a great asset. Like I think like the takeaway was, wow, it is like an iceberg that we see what WatchMojo is, but there's this great team and there's all these brands and there's all this capability. We're showing them our technology, and people like the faces. Like one guy was like on the floor. He was like, oh my God. And I'm like, we're not even using this yet. We just built some of the stuff in like Mojo Unity as we, you know, some of the, and then I was taking him through like, you know, some of the stuff that we're doing, even like AI. I was like, AI is not just like it's a defensive process improvement tool, but I was like, we're using it more offensively, you know, to create content, to do a lot of stuff. So long story short, yes, I do think we would have been very different, but it's also possible that one day, like I say to Joe Pesci, you walk in a room and they're like, you're done. They could have been like, we don't really care about YouTube because we don't want to share revenue with YouTube, or we don't like about, you know, we don't like fair use, or we don't like this and that. And they would have like, we'd be doing like local reporting for their like news brands. Like that is also possible. When you sell, it's like, as Mark Cuban once said, you want the cash or the crown, you know? And funny, I never even wanted either. I just wanted to work on cool stuff. And I think Ziff Davis would have also very much put us like in a box. They would have been like, just do WatchMojo. They're like, what you're doing under Mojo Plays, just do for IGN. Miss Mojo, we would keep because they're like, that's a good brand that we could use when we go into ad agencies, not just pitch men's brands, but have like a female demo. But I think everything else, they would be like, yeah, we don't care about that. Because they're, I mean, this is a compliment. They're a very disciplined business, very disciplined, you know, like props, like they're, you know, so I think, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Anybody that thinks like by selling you don't change is naive. And this is the thing that I yesterday at the airport, I was taking the guys at a high level. I'm like, we really have to put these in buckets. I said, some of these parties are really just, again, big investment funds that want to start making bets in media. Unlike our current private equity fund that is great, like they score high on character integrity, they're not really media, not savvy, they're not media operators. So like we've talked about like what it takes to build a successful media franchise, and now, you know, the Joe Rogans, the acquired podcasts, the WatchMojos, I'm like, it's a lot of tinkering and serendipity. It's not like an MBA exercise and like you don't build that in a Excel spreadsheet. You really have to be in the trenches, the man in the arena, you know, Citizen Roosevelt's speech there. So, but these are like actually a bit like the Vince McMahon. These are like people that have been in media, I mean, I'd love to name drop, but I'm somewhat disciplined there. I don't want them to be offended. There's nothing, I'm not saying anything. We just had a conversation type of thing. But since they've already submitted a preliminary offer, I want to be very kosher and just make this more educational for like younger entrepreneurs. But what's really exciting is I go, wow, these are people that kind of built for example, purpose of illustration. These are executives at these funds who have built like the MTVs, the ESPNs, the CNNs, the Nickelodeons, the BETs, that I'm like, I could learn from them and they could help us and we could do a lot of damage because they're more growth-oriented risk takers. And then there are others who are really more just media companies. Like they are media companies. Some of them are backed by investors. Some of them are publicly traded. And there I salivate because I go, they have an army of sales and marketing and they see how much we've done. So it's a bit like when Disney bought ESPN, they were like, we're not going to push ABC Sports anymore. Now, I'm not like driven by greed. WatchMojo's main growth, despite the incredible 20 years we've had, is going to come in the next 10 years because YouTube is going to go parabolic. Like YouTube now is one in desktop, dominated in mobile, is crushing it in connected TVs. All of the ad dollars that are still on TV
will shift,
but they will shift to AVOD. They're not going to go shift to display ads. That dollar, that budget is not going to go to search advertising. It's not going to go buying a banner ad on some long-term site. It's going to go towards video. It's not going to go really on, some of it will go on Netflix as AVOD, but Netflix is small in AVOD. Their main business is subscription video on demand. So there's like this crazy amount of like, it's like a dam that's breaking. And TV advertising no longer makes sense on an ROI basis because the media companies, it's not greed, it's just business. They want to charge more because inflation and their costs go up, but their audiences shrink.
Yeah.
Or if you're WPP, if you're Coca-Cola, if you're Samsung, if you're Air Canada, who again found a way to screw me, little parentheses, you no longer can justify spending what you're doing on TV. So you start to look at and you already are, you're spending. So all that ad dollars is going to shift to places like YouTube. And YouTube, again, I don't have a big head. I still think we're unknown, even though clearly we're not. I mean, the entire generation that grew up on YouTube knows us. We are seen as like great programming, brand safe, long form, as we're pushing into longer form content. 45% of our viewership of our watch time is on big screens. So YouTube is going to, but I'm fine with that. I have no problems if a company buys us and they benefit like in the next decade. Good for them. They take the risk or I'll help them, you know. I just want, like I said, like it's like you've played on a team, you've been loyal and you've won a lot. You've won accolades, you've won awards, but at some point you're like, I don't want to be like I'm taking my talents to South Beach, but it's like you realize that like, oh, wow, I've done a lot with this great team. You know, as I say, give me a soldier, we could beat any army. Give me an army, we could build it, we could defeat any empire. But one person doesn't do anything. You do need an army, right? So it's really exciting. So I was like, we need to determine, do we still want to be like a small tribe that helps this bigger army and we fly their flag ultimately alongside us or even above us? Or do we want to be like the platform play that some investment fund that is really just now getting started wants to kind of back us and use us as the tip of the spear? The drawback is for the first 3, 6, 9 months, nothing changes in a way. We're still kind of us, you know, we're the army. But yes, in 9 months or in 2 years, we'll buy other assets, we'll hire a lot more, we'll take more risks, but it's still like, okay, we're still alone trying to boil the ocean. Whereas in the other one, it does take a bit of the pressure off. Now there's another kind of pressure, but it's just really fascinating because I've never really had this dynamic where there's like going to be 7, 8, 9, 10 companies ideally. And, you know, they're all fascinating. I respect them all. You know, it's super flattering that they even want to partner with us. And that's what's really hard for me because I generally like to work with people, but I can't, you know, it's like when the Quebec Nordiques traded Eric Lindros to both the Rangers and the Flyers. You know, yesterday, one of my colleagues was like, well, what if you get an LOI? Could you sign? I go, well, you can't sign exclusive LOIs with 2 parties. I said, that's like Marcel Aubu there of the Nordiques. I go, you have to pick. And I go, that's for me, it's going to be really, really. That's also why, like, I don't meet as many people, because whenever I meet people, I want to work with them. I want to help them. I want to, like, and I go, at some point, it doesn't make sense. I'm like, it's just like, I do need to build a little bit of like, so it's fascinating and traveling so much. And that's also why I did the album. I was just like, I needed a release. I was like sitting there going like, it's a weird time in my life, you know?
It's a good problem to have, though, ultimately.
It's a good problem, and it's amplified by how hard I had it earlier on. And it was not just hard, it was just like brutally hard, like on every level, you know, like mortgaging my place, struggling with payroll every 2 weeks. And then I mean, I don't want to sound like George Costanza on Seinfeld, where he takes the rental board through his
tragic life story.
Tragic life story. I mean, I have a great life. Don't get me wrong, but it was a very, very weird thing. Anyway, and then to conclude, I think 23 to 25 was actually a bit like, you know, 21 and 22 were pretty, 21 was really good. 22 and 23 were really hard because of the end of ZERP and a lot of things that were external that affected us. But I do feel like in the last year or two, I've personally, and the company has gone through like a rebirth, a regeneration, a rejuvenation, and a bit of vindication, although I'm not like petty like that. Like, I still want to be like humble and modest and just appreciate and gratitude. But there is a part of me, you know, I go like sins and virtues. There was a part of me that wanted to be like, I told you so. Like for 10 years, I told you so, that this was going to happen. It's here. But that's not my personality. Like, that's one moment and then I shut it out. I'm just very grateful. And I just want to make the right decision. To be honest with you, it's really, really hard because you can speak to your lawyers and they'll give you like random advice. You can speak to your board. They're not really in your shoes because they're not operators. And then like I also am like balancing like what's good for the team, what's good for, you know, everybody else. But like once those conditions are met, where I'm like, I'm making the right decision for the team, I'm making the right decision for this, that, then yes, I'm going to try to be a bit more, I don't want to be selfish, but I'm not a martyr. Like I don't want to put myself in a situation that I'm going to wake up and go like, oh, you're a moron. Like you wanted to make everybody happy, but you made yourself miserable. And you actually had a good setup before. You had a minority investor that supports you. You have a great team. I also have leaned back. I think before I wanted to just let everybody their space, and then people didn't really know who I was. So they questioned sometimes why I would ask something. And now I feel people kind of know who because it's a different team, right? It's not like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's a good problem to have. And then now I feel like it's like you're entering your golden years. Like you've done your school, you've done your partying, you've done your crazy shit. And now you're like, hey, I actually got my shit together. My life's going in the right place. And I'm just so excited and humbled and flattered. And I really, really, it's like when you're, as much as it's the team, and the whole point of bringing the team was to show them that there's a lot of brilliant people at this company. And then we had slides where I would go like, not just these great people. There's like, I mean, your face was up with Sean. I was like, these are the WatchMojo guys. And I was like, I was running through the Miss Mojo team. I was like, there's so many great people. But I do feel in a way like a free agent, you know, that's going to sign with anybody. And it was funny because I was like, my default is I'm like, well, maybe some of these companies don't want me to stay. Maybe they're like, even though I'm very diplomatic, they're like, maybe Ash is very like strong-minded, strong-willed. People used to question if I was coachable. I'm like the most coachable person. I'm like, please give me feedback. Tell me what I do wrong. But I understand the optics are a bit different. And I was like, maybe these people might not want me to stick around. And in a few of the meetings, the first week, they were all telling the advisor when they would leave the room, they're like, yeah, if Ash isn't staying, we're not buying this company. Not because I'm special, but they're like, he knows where the bodies are buried. Like he knows. So then the advisor was like, we just want to have a chat with you. By the way, if the advisors are watching, they're freaking out that I'm saying all this, but it's generic. It's general. They're like, we just want to make sure you don't intend on leaving. I'm like, no, I love this industry. I love the team. I love what we're doing. And I mean, you saw, like I have a renewed, you know,
well, yes, now you're starting up all these new projects that you're deeply invested in. So it's a good sign of things to come, I think.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. So I think in the next week or two, I'll have some clarity. And I know it's weird. I've actually not, I mean, if one of our teammates watches this, they're well aware of everything. But I purposely didn't want to get ahead because I still thought maybe nothing will happen. But now I'm like, okay, these companies were really impressed and they've kind of expressed how we fit. So I'm like, and then I'll take the team. I'll be very transparent. I'll be like, these were some of the profiles of the people that we looked at. And, you know, these were the pros and cons of each. And I'm going to present to those who care why we, and I'm very transparent. You know, I'm not above anybody. Will be like, this is the decision. If you have any feedback, you know, tell me now. Super exciting. But I am now like more coming back from New York. Yeah, I'm going to suspend the process. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm very much leaning towards doing something, provided the offers make sense and there's no hair on it type of thing. And I'm very excited for the team. I think for the team, this does set up really to go from the MTVs of the early 80s or, late 80s to like what happened in the 90s or ESPN, where it really became synonymous with like the filet mignon of the racket,
Sounds very promising. Looking forward to seeing what happens.
Yeah, we shall
should be interesting. So we didn't have a poll today, but I do want to remind the audience that if you're watching this and you have any questions for us, anything at all, you can leave a comment. And next week's episode will kind of be like a Q&A. We'll address some of those questions. We'll talk about internal questions that we've had after we talk about podcasts, what comes next, and we'll put a close to this wonderful series that I'm very fortunate I got to do with you, Ash.
Yeah, thank you. I will always remember that moment on the beach. I know I've alluded to this many times when Young Deuces said the documentary and you literally at the same time were like, I want to do more podcasts. And I was like, let me connect the strawberry ingredient with this rum ingredient. And I'm an alchemist. I like to bring things in.
You're making drinks in your mind.
For sure. And I was like on my phone drinking. I was like, the sun. I was like, and this is what I mean is you have to do it. You have to show people. And I feel like this is in a way a good template where I'm like, hey guys, you can do stuff. What do you want to do? A 5-episode podcast on you're into stamps? I'm open. If you're really passionate and there's like something that's unique. Yeah. And so I also don't think I would have done the album if it wasn't for this podcast. So thank you.
Well, I'm happy that you're leaning into your passions because I think it's good for everybody to do that.
For sure. Full shizzle.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week for episode 20. And until then, be well. See you next time. Thanks, Ash.
Take care.